Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast. Tom Loxas is here, and we're going to talk about the Cubs, and we're going to start with an exhaustive look at the Bears' exhausting coaching search. Well, maybe it's exhaustive. I don't know. Tom, how are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm usually on Thursday nights, but I've got a Zoom with the Bears tomorrow, so Thanks for accommodating me.
That's right. I was going to ask what time your interview was. I guess now we know. I got a call from Kevin Warren, but it wasn't about the coaching search. He's put me in charge of building the stadium on a raft in Lake Michigan. On a bar. We talked about a barge. We're going to go with a raft, and it's going to take me a long fucking time to blow that thing up, but I'll try. Did you see any of the press conferences yesterday?
Yes, actually, I ended up watching all of Pohl's. I didn't catch George's though.
Oh, you missed a great one.
Yeah, but I did. Yeah, I did catch all of Pohl's.
Yeah, George and Kevin did theirs in the hallway.
Yeah, very
informal. George was about 8 minutes. Kevin was like 11, which for Kevin, that's usually one answer. Is 11 minutes.
Yeah, it's brief, yeah.
And I wrote it up in the newsletter today. He gave Courtney Cronin asked him a question that he said, "That's a good question, Courtney." And then he just talked about nothing that she asked for a good 30 seconds without even taking a breath. He's good at that. Like if he doesn't want to answer a question, he'll talk and make you feel like you got an answer, and at the end you're like, "What that didn't have anything to do with what I asked." But one thing is perfectly clear. They made perfectly clear. Ryan Poles is in charge of this search. It's his man to pick. But then Kevin got asked, what if a candidate wants his own GM? He's like, Ryan's in charge of the search. But that's also a hypothetical that I don't think I should answer. In other words, well, we'll see what Ben wants.
Yeah.
He wants him out. He's out. Do whatever it takes. I thought they all gave. Ryan gave one I thought really frustrating answer. It was a question about after all the turmoil that Caleb went through this year, and Ryan's like, "What turmoil?"
Define turmoil, yeah.
What
Define
turmoil?
Stress, yeah.
I don't know. You fired the coach and the offensive coordinator, and you never blocked for him. Other than that, no, everything's great. Ugh.
Well, yeah, he probably meant which lane are we talking about here? Yeah.
You're going to need to be way more specific. Could we narrow it down to 8 things that went wrong?
Yeah, at first I thought he was kind of setting them up well, what do you mean? What turmoil? But yeah, I think now more or less it was,
Caleb threw for 3,541 yards.
Okay.
Which I believe is third in Bears history. It's just ridiculous.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Jaden Daniels threw for 3,568. A difference of 27 yards. you know how long the Hail Mary was? 56 yards. Not the Hail Mary. Tyreek doesn't knock the ball in. Caleb outpasses Jayden by 29 yards. Not that it would have really mattered, but it is funny. And they're both really good players. I think both teams are very happy with the quarterback they got.
Yeah.
But their stats, passing stats, were very similar. Very similar.
Yeah.
Jayden had a couple more touchdown passes, but he also had 4 more interceptions. Jayden's completion percentage was higher. It was like 69%. Caleb's was 63%. But pretty close. And from what I can understand, actually, if you switch teams, if the Commanders had Caleb this year and the Bears had Jayden, Caleb would have had a lot more passing yards because Jayden would have been in traction by like week 4.
Yeah. Anyway, there's no way that he would have been able to withstand some of those sacks.
I think all 3 guys got some variation of the question, why is this search going to be different than the ones you've done before? I didn't think any of them gave the obvious answer. At least I think Poles got to it. He ticked off a bunch of things. But the biggest difference is we actually have a quarterback this time. Like this job is far more attractive than when we had Mitch or when we had Justin or when we had Jay. I mean, for all of Jay's talent, I don't think he was a super attractive guy to coach.
Right. Plus, he had a reputation of being hard to coach. So
that's what I mean. It was like,
well,
he's good, but he's kind of a
reputation.
Dick. Yeah, and he's going to do whatever he wants. So we'll see.
No, that is a good point, and I think that does help a lot.
There was for a while yesterday, it looked like the Bears were going to have their pick of like Mike Vrabel was only going to interview. I guess he interviewed with the Jets, but he basically was going to interview with the Patriots and the Bears, and Ben Johnson was going to interview with the Patriots and the Bears. It's like, hey, we'll take the one the Patriots don't get. That'll be fine. Now Ben Johnson is going to Jacksonville. He's going to the Raiders. So he's expanded his teams a little bit. I know Tom Brady is with the Raiders, but I can't imagine that anybody really wants that job right now. I mean, who's their quarterback?
Yeah, that's the biggest part.
And then Jacksonville, I mean, I was shocked. I shouldn't be. That guy has just always been there. But they refused to fire Trent Baalke, their general manager.
Yeah.
Even though nobody likes him. Nobody wants to work for him. He's not very good at his job, but he just keeps it. So we'll see. Today, the Bears did their first 2 interviews. And even though they could have done both of these in person, they did them both on the magic internet, which I'm sure it has to really like, I just can't imagine. George must be like, so like, oh my God, I can see him right there. And I could talk to him at the same time. So yeah, George, that's technology's been around for a while. But they conducted virtual interviews with Mike Vrabel and Arizona Cardinals offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. And then tomorrow, in addition to you, maybe you'll bump into. Well, you won't because it's too bad they're not in person. You could talk to these guys in the lobby. Former Northwestern quarterback Mike Kafka was the offensive coordinator for the Giants. I mean, why wouldn't you want that? And Pete Carroll. Sure, why not? And then on Saturday, both Lions coordinators, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, will be zooming in to Hallis Hall. The other guys who are on their list include Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator of the Bills. Gar Foreman got to weigh in, and Matt Campbell from Iowa State, their head coach, is going to interview. Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator for the Vikings. Shockingly, Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator from the Commanders.
Did they announce Cliff? Because I didn't see that yet.
Yeah. They've requested him, whether or not Cliff, of course he's going to. Todd Monken, offensive coordinator of the Ravens. Arthur Smith, offensive coordinator of the Steelers. They're bringing him in just so they can go, can you believe Justin won't throw the ball? Anthony Weaver, defensive coordinator for the Dolphins, the only candidate on this list that I've had breakfast with. I had breakfast with Anthony before a Notre Dame spring game.
How did that come about?
Dad bought tickets, and it was part of the deal. We were there. Different players sat at different tables. One year, we also had breakfast with Rocky Boyman. And his crazy red hair. Very nice guys. Thomas Brown's interview has not yet been scheduled, according to anybody knows. Tough to get a hold of Thomas.
They're just going to keep pushing him off until it's over with. Like, hey, Thomas, you're next. You're next week.
They got denied in their request for Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy. 17-9 in his career against the Bears. I can't believe he lost 9 times to them.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right.
And then an intriguing name, a guy I've always liked, but I don't know that I want him. David Shaw, the former Stanford head coach. His title, he has a great fake title in Denver. Senior Personnel Executive. So I want to, we're going to run through these guys, but I want to start with, who do you want? Like you haven't had a chance to talk to these guys yet. I'm sure at some point the Bears will let you interview them because it sounds like they're going to let everybody interview everybody. But on this list, if you were picking, who would you pick?
I mean, Johnson's the obvious choice in a lot of ways. And I think, the only thing without being able to talk to these guys and find out, the vibe that you get from him. But, if they feel like he can lead a team, I think he's, the hands-on favorite. But, we don't know about some of these other guys. I mean, I've heard some people in the league really like Liam Cohen, and
he's not on their list yet.
No, he's not. He's not, which would be surprising if they don't talk to him. I'm not against them going with a non-offensive guy, although it's not ideal, but I don't think that they need to pigeonhole themselves completely. But yeah, if Ben Johnson can be the leader of the team, then I think he's your guy. But at the same time, I feel like it's not the only thing. You can't just, like, I see a lot of people on Twitter saying like, oh, they need to get the play caller. It's like, well, play caller itself isn't the only thing that matters. I mean, Sean McVay is more than a play caller, and so is Shanahan, LaFleur. These guys can lead a whole locker room. So it's not just being a play caller. Yeah, if that were the case, I mean, yeah, there's plenty of guys that are good play callers, but can't, run a team. But at the same time, Vrabel, I'd be fine with Vrabel too. And Pete Carroll, if it weren't for him being north of 70, I could talk myself into that. And he's still, I mean, he's a young 73 or whatever he's going to be, 74, but it's just not the right time for him, but I wouldn't hate it.
Where is Marv Levy on this list?
Yeah.
What is Marv?
Yeah, I mean, if
90?
If he's only still 90. Alive, they would talk to him.
Marv's not dead, is he?
I mean, how do you?
He's alive. He's only 99.
Wow, he's alive?
He's alive.
Well, I would have lost that, but
where else would you want to be?
I would have lost that game. I mean, if you're talking, there's people on Twitter that are saying like, it's Ben Johnson or bust. And I don't know. I mean, you just look at the draft the way it was too, like many people thought it was Caleb or bust too. And I really still will feel comfortable thinking that Caleb will be the best one in the long run. But I don't think you'd be sad if you had Jaden Daniels, so at the same time, like, I'm not going to put all my eggs in the Ben Johnson basket and hold my breath. I'm not going to be crushed if they don't get him. But if they blow it and he wanted to come here, then I'd be pissed.
Yeah, I mean, if it turns out he doesn't come because he was their number one choice, but they wouldn't make some kind of concession to him that he really wanted, then that would be very Bears. I think there's,
and that's
I think,
wins
and
a
what
Fredo.
the hell do I know? I think there's two guys above and beyond. Like, I think if they come out of this with Vrabel or Johnson, they did a really good job.
Right.
I think Vrabel is a good football coach, and I think the Bears could use a good football coach. And I wrote this in the newsletter today. I don't care if it's an offensive coach or a defensive coach. It tends to be when you get a good coach, your good players play well for the good coach.
Yeah.
Because they figure out how to put them in positions to do good things. And bad coaches don't know how to do that. And that's how you end up. Plus, Vrabel, for a defensive player, he caught 10 touchdown passes.
Wow.
Caught one in the Super Bowl. At least one in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I remember that.
He has a connection to Ryan Poles that seems like it's overblown. Vrabel finished his career with the Chiefs when Poles was there as like a scout. But I think the real connection is that both of them are, like, I don't know what the word is. Both of them like and respect and get information from Scott Pioli. So I have a feeling they're fairly well connected. I do think, though, that, I mean, I would be shocked if Vrabel isn't the Patriots coach. I feel like, I don't think Robert Kraft fires Gerard Mayo within minutes of the season ending unless he thinks he can get Vrabel, who's a guy that he really likes, a guy that he pissed off the Titans 2 years ago when during the season, Vrabel on his bye week flew to Foxborough to get inducted into the Patriots Ring of Honor or whatever they call it.
Yeah, that was
while
wild.
The Titans coach with his red Patriot jacket on, hanging out in the owner's box with Kraft. They have a good relationship. And I think the two best jobs open right now are the Bears and the Patriots, because you've got Caleb Williams and Drake May. Like, you have the quarterback, and Drake looks like he's going to be a good player. The Bears rebuild is farther along than the Patriots. They both have terrible offensive lines. So they have that in common. But I also think a guy like Vrabel, it was a miserable season. They lost 10 in a row, but the media made it sound like they got blown out every week. Well, no, that part of the reason it was so frustrating was they weren't getting blown out. Like, they had that stretch where they lost 3 division games in 3 weeks by a total of 7 points. Like, this was a team with better coaching, would have won more games, and a team that has one huge, easily identifiable weakness. They have a shit offensive line.
Yeah.
This team is completely different if that offensive line is good, and it's probably a quasi playoff team if that offensive line was average. But Caleb was under siege basically all season. The running game was horribly inconsistent because of the way they blocked. It fucked everything up. And that's all on Poles. This is on the former offensive lineman who's had 3 years to fix this line. And it's barely, I don't know if it's better than the line he got, but it's not. It still needs a lot of work. And I look at it, if you're a good football coach like Vrabel or Ben Johnson, and you're looking at the roster, the Bears have some pretty good players on that roster. They have one huge gaping hole that Poles has to explain to you in the interview. How are you going to fix that offensive line? They've got 3 of the top 42 picks in the draft, and they've got the 6th most cap room in the league. There is no reason they shouldn't be able to completely overhaul that line this offseason, especially with guidance from a coach who knows what to look for and knows what kind of guys he wants.
Yeah, and I'd even argue that even if you just got a really good left tackle, that makes your line look so much better. Because I think Darnell Wright can be just fine, on the right side.
Yeah, I think he suffered early in the year from having Nate Davis. I feel like he was trying to cover for the guy playing next to him. And when they moved Matt Pryor over there, who's no great shakes, Darnell improved quite a bit. He turned back into the guy we expected.
Yeah,
I also think Braxton Jones, he's a serviceable left tackle. He missed the beginning of the season. He missed the end of the season. But I've seen other like big football brains who are like, if you could find a left tackle and you could kick Braxton into guard, then you'd have he'd be a really good guard. So now you have, if you find a left tackle, you move Braxton to guard. Now you're just looking for a center and another guard.
Yeah, I would be focused on left tackle and center. I think those are the two
Yeah,
once you get those positions solved, I think they're going to be in solid shape. But
it's funny
that's a big ask still.
When the Rams let Coleman Shelton leave, he'd been their starting center for 2 years, and they just let him go. They didn't try to re-sign him. And it was the Rams were telling people, Coleman's not a bad player, but he's too small. He gets overpowered, and we've got to get bigger at center. And then the Bears saw it week after week. Little Coleman being thrown into Caleb's lap over and over again. It's like, oh yeah, that's why that guy was available for $2 million. Because, a bunch of the center crap that we put up with 2 years ago, with Cody Whitehair and Lucas Patrick disappeared. Like the snaps weren't going over Caleb's head or rolling back to him. That stuff was fine, but the guys in front of him were not getting blocked, and that doesn't help for him.
Yeah, and the two things that I have the most issue with Poles is, I and just about everybody else could see that the offensive line was still a big question mark, and bringing Eberflus back, we all knew those were very questionable moves, and I just feel like, all right, I gave him the benefit of the doubt because I was like, all right, he went and got the quarterback. He must think now is the time to win, and things will be different with the coaching staff, as well as maybe he thought, a lot of the offensive line issues were caused by Fields holding the ball too long. And, there's still probably some truth to that. And Caleb, unfortunately, does that a lot too. But that's just unforgivable to put your shiny new toy behind that line and with that coaching staff and just think it's all going to work out because he wanted to. Yeah. I think that was the biggest thing. He just wanted it to work out. That's bad.
Caleb holding the ball too long, I feel like is overblown. He does
it's
have
not the same way Justin does.
Right. And he did have a few of those sacks and not as many late, mostly because the blocking got even worse and he couldn't spin out of it and get sacked again later for another 5-yard loss. I ran a thing on Monday about the quarterbacks that he was like 34th in the league in longest time from snap to throw. Okay. And that seems really bad, except the guys around him were like Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. These were good quarterbacks that were right within a tenth of a second of him or more. And they were all, and the guys at the top of the list were all immobile. Like Andy Dalton was number 2. And it just showed that the guys who couldn't evade anything just threw the ball right away. And the guys who tried to extend plays had the higher numbers. Yeah. I think that the way Caleb plays will become an asset when they can actually, when he's doing it, he's not doing it because he drops back and now he's got to do a 180 and pivot away from somebody. And now the play's all fucked up because the timing got thrown off. And you're right. It's completely different. The Justin time to throw, part of that was he was a running quarterback, so he would extend some of the plays, but there were just so many plays where he just stood there and he clearly didn't know what he was looking at. And it's like, you've got to just throw it. We didn't get a lot of that with Caleb. He's a much better player. He's a good quarterback. He's, this thought that they've ruined him already, I don't see it. And if you were worried about it, the very last time he got the ball this season, he took charge and he got their ass down the field and got him, and they talked about that last play. The Bears lined up, the Packers called timeout. And so in the huddle, Caleb and DJ talked about, okay, if the corner shades you inside, you're going to do this. If he's right head up, he's going to do this. If he's on your outside, you're going to run that. They adjusted the route. And they both knew exactly at the snap where to go. And it got DJ to the spot so he could catch it, get down, and they had enough time to go up and kill it. And if this is a quarterback who's been ruined by his rookie year, it certainly didn't look like. So I don't worry about that.
No,
there's a lot of shit to worry about with the Bears.
Yeah, they definitely didn't ruin him, but they didn't do him a lot of favors. So
no,
he definitely made it harder on him.
He should have been able to have a lot more success than he had.
Well, look, if you would have gotten a real offensive coordinator or he had a really good offensive coach, they would have worked with him on some of the issues that he does have, like, his footwork. I've heard some people like Tim Jennings on the Score say a lot of his inaccuracy is just because he's got some sloppy footwork that needs to be worked on. It can be fixed. Yeah, really. But
quickly. I get that. And I'm sure it's true, but I also think that that's where the lack of protection and the uncertain protection.
Oh, you're having to move hand in hand.
You're having to move when you shouldn't have to move. And that's going to fuck up your footwork.
Oh, totally. I mean, look, if it wasn't like we didn't see it at times where he looked really good, like against Jacksonville, that game was about as flawless as I've seen him play, and that was really promising. And then what came after that was just incredibly bad, but as a team aspect. But yeah, I mean, the one thing that I'll hang my hat on and I'll die on this hill is that this kid knows how to play at a different level in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
He literally cannot teach.
He literally had the highest quarterback rating in the NFL on fourth down and in the fourth quarter as a rookie.
That's
really good.
Yeah, you can fix the other stuff.
14 of 18 passing on fourth down this year. It was something ridiculous. I was like, Jesus.
Yeah,
should have gone for it more. They had plenty of fourth downs.
Stats out. You just look at him. You just watch him. He relishes it. He likes to play in the fourth quarter, and that's
and some of
that's
those
what you would see
in the Vikings game. They had a 4th and 1, and they have like a quick slant called, but he sees the Rome is going to be open. He throws like a 25-yard pass to Rome on 4th and 1. Completely unafraid that he's going to miss the throw and be like, Jesus, we had the first down. He's like, we can get 25 yards if I throw it there.
Yeah, so that may be his best play of the year.
There was that. There was the pass to DJ in that game to set up the field goal that sent it to overtime. That was a great throw.
That was amazing too, yeah.
Actually, I think his best throw of the year might have been the touchdown in the Seattle game to Rome that got called back because Jake Curran got called for holding. That throw was him running left and having to just like somehow torque his body and throw like Dan Quisenberry. And that was a great pass.
Yeah, that was all the stuff you saw in his hype tape from USC. You see those throwing across the body plays and just drool. And that's what he put on display that night. It was too bad that one didn't count. But yeah, that's the biggest thing that I will hang my hat on is that this kid knows how to turn it on in the fourth quarter. And yeah, I mean, he put him in position to win against Washington on the road. He put him in position to beat Detroit on the road.
Yep.
He put him in position to beat Green Bay twice.
Should have beat the Packers both times.
That's something that you really can't.
And had they beaten the Packers both times, they would have finished in third place by themselves. And the Packers would have gone 0-6 in the division. The Packers and Bears both went 1-5 in the North.
Wow. That is crazy.
They technically tied for third in the division with the Packers.
How did they win so many games? Yeah.
Because they didn't lose. They only lost one other game, right? Or two. They had the Bears game, their 7th loss, right? Or 6th. They might have been 11-6. I think they're 10-7.
I think that sounds right.
They lost the Eagles in the opener, and then they had to lose somebody else. But yeah,
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
All right,
yeah,
so
some Packer fans want to get rid of LaFleur. We'll take him.
Yeah, I mean he's a dainty little guy who looks like he spends way too much time on trimming his beard up. Actually, that's what ruined the season. It's Matt Eberflus's wife. It's her fault. If he doesn't get the haircut and grows the beard, he's fired. It's her fault.
Damn. I don't know how that plan didn't work.
No. It is funny though, for all the, he was not a good coach, and he just stood there blankly at the end of games. They actually played better when he was their coach than they did when he left.
That was
especially the defense. The
defense looked really bad. They look really lost. Yeah.
And
you think he gets a defensive coordinator job this year?
Might. I'll bet he can if he wants. He may decide to take a year. I think the wife doesn't want to leave the house in Chicago, and he's still getting paid. Although she can live there.
I could see him as a college head coach.
I don't know. I don't know if the new NIL world, if Matt Eberflus, I don't know how appealing
that's true.
Complete lack of personality is.
That'd be complicated.
I think he's a good defensive coordinator, and he should go be a defensive coordinator. So he should just be happy, be a defensive coordinator, enjoy yourself, Not everybody's made out to be a head coach. You were not made out to be a head coach.
That's it.
No
That's
shame in that.
He's a perfect example.
Look at Steve Spagnuolo, right? He was a complete flop
yes.
with the Giants, and now he's the greatest coach in the world with the Chiefs. And every year he flirts with taking a job somewhere, and then he decides at the last minute, I got it too damn good. I can't wait. I'm really hoping for the Jets hire Matt Nagy. Because New York will love that dumb shit. That'll be great.
Oh, man.
So anyway, looking at the list of the guys the Bears have, I think Vrabel and Johnson are the two best guys. And then I don't know about, what do you think of Aaron Glenn? I think Aaron Glenn should go coach the Jets, right? Like he was a Jet all pro.
I think it sounds like there's people who think that he's either got a good shot at the Saints job or possibly the Jets. He just, and again, I wouldn't probably have too much. I don't know that much about him and what his plans would be offensively, but it does sound like he's a guy that can command a room. So yeah, I think that he'd be a good candidate.
We know the perils of drawing conclusions from Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
But he was very impressive in the Lions Hard Knocks season. That was, he really he seems really sharp and like a real leader. And I feel like if the Bears are going to go defense, though, it needs to be for somebody, in my mind, if you're going to pick a guy who's not a offensive head coach, I want somebody who's done it. I don't want to take another flyer on a first-time head coach who's a defensive coach. That's
Yeah, and that also still excludes Flores for me, because even though the guy's intriguing, I think that he could be like that hard-ass figurehead. I don't want to take the chance with him because you cannot put Caleb in his hands.
I also don't think there is any way in the world a George McCaskey run football team hires a guy who's suing the NFL. I don't think there's any possible way that happens.
I almost wonder if the only reason he's on the interview list is just because he's, got connections with polls and they just want to make it look good. I mean, they're interviewing everybody else. They have to. It would look fishy if they didn't at least give him a Zoom. But yeah, I didn't believe a lot of that stuff that was coming out, even though it came mostly from Albert Breer, but I don't think that's going to go anywhere. What do you think about some of these rumors too? I've been hearing, I just, there's a lot of shit out there right now, but there's, some people will say that Poles wants Ben Johnson, but Warren wants, the bigger, program builder. I don't think I necessarily believe any of that.
I don't know how people would actually know that. I feel like that's people pulling shit out of their ass. There's a lot of that.
I mean, unless Warren's a big
Kevin
talker,
Kevin's a weirdo. I mean, we know that.
Yeah.
When you hear him talk, and I could imagine him getting fixated on, but it's not like Mike Vrabel is such a big name that it's not like, to me, it seems like, I wonder if Kevin would have pushed for like Belichick, because that's like, we're going to hire the greatest coach in the history of the NFL to run the greatest football team in the history of the NFL. Just the way he talks.
We could talk about that on another podcast. I don't believe that, but I think he's a really great. Yeah, I think he's a really great coach. I don't think he's the best
in NFL history.
No.
Who we got him behind? Dick Duran. Got him behind Dick Duran. And
I'd have to put together a list, but I'll put Bill Walsh over him.
Yeah, Bill was obviously a great coach, kind of a.
And he was a hell of an innovator at the time.
Yes, I think Belichick was a great coach. I don't think that.
Definitely.
I think he's probably. In my mind, I think he's probably the best coach there was.
I'm not gonna disagree, but
right behind George Hill, who founded the league.
It's hard, man. It's hard when you have Tom Brady.
That's right, but there's also, if you give Tom Brady to any other coach, do they win? How many did they win? 6? That's
a good point.
Do they win 6? I mean, it's not like. No. I mean, they really maximized that, and they really built they built a whole team, and they did. I don't know. Brady ended up being so great, and he won one with Bruce Arians. Brady was going to win championships somewhere. He turned out to be I also think though that Brady has kind of alluded to this. And when Brady, he's in charge of the Raiders coaching, or not in charge, he's going to consult on it. First thing he did was they tried to convince Belichick to leave Carolina to come coach the Raiders. I think the reason Belichick was a huge part of Brady getting to the point where he got, that then Brady could just I hate it when people give coaches credit for players. I think Brady was always going to turn into a good quarterback. I think he got to that faster because he was so well coached. And then his innate greatness just helped carry the Patriots for an era that went, they had that weird gap. Like, we always think they just won championships like every other year. They won like 2, and then they didn't win for like 8 years. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they just started winning again. Anyway, so
don't get me wrong, Belichick's on my Mount Rushmore. He might even be number 2, but yeah, I don't know. I have to give that some thought, but
we'll see how he does in Carolina. See if he's
kind of
like
Phil Jackson.
We'll see if he's as good a coach as Larry Fedora was. And then we'll
getting way off the topic. I mean, let's just for like 1 minute. Do you think Phil Jackson's the best coach of all time?
It's kind of the same argument, right? Like, he won all those championships, but he had all those great players. Like, yeah, well, you got to have great players to win. I mean, maybe a good coach can win a title with a good team. But if you're going to have a dynasty, you have to have great players on the dynasty. So Phil had Michael and Scotty, and then he had Shaq and Kobe, and that's why you win 10 championships instead of 2. He was a great coach. And he ended up being, the perfect, for all the shit Jerry Krause takes. Took a lot of guts to fire Doug Collins and give that job to Phil Jackson.
It sure did. I mean, he was
the completely right time to do it.
Yeah.
But I'll have to get my buddy Kelly Dwyer on, and we can talk about our favorite peyote smoking coach. And
and Phil had the ability to manage those egos, which was not easy.
I mean, but Chicago's been blessed. We had Ditka, we had Phil, we had George Halas, we had Mike Quaddy. We've had all the greats. Cherry Bevington. It's been an amazing run we've had over the last century.
Yeah.
So Ben Johnson, I'm a dope. So Drew Lawrence and I were talking, messaging each other back and forth because he's my buddy who writes for The Guardian and he writes for People Magazine once in a while, and he's a huge Bears fan. As soon as I forget what a big Bears fan he is, and he was asking me about Ben Johnson, and he's like, "Do you think he's just Adam Gase?" Because it was similar, right? Like Adam, the year he came to the Bears to be Fox's offensive coordinator, it was because he'd been with him in Denver. It was a big shock because he was just supposed to go be a head coach, but he wanted to be picky about it, and he did one more year, and it upped his stock even more because Jay had such a good year, and then he went to the Dolphins, and they won right away with the Dolphins, but then it started to get a little weird, and he got fired, and then he went to the Jets, and he had the press conference where his eyes bugged out, and it was just off the rails, and now he's gone. Like, he's just, when was the last time before this search you heard his name?
Yeah.
And I kind of wondered the same thing because Ben did a similar thing, right? Like, everybody thought he was going to be a head coach last year. And it sounds like, according to, I like how both of us, our sources, is listening to Albert Breer talk on other shows. Albert said the loss to the Niners bothered Ben more than he even thought it would. And he just, when he was interviewing for jobs last year, he's like, I think this is a year too soon. I think I need to go back to Detroit and we need to win the fucking Super Bowl next year. And then I can go off and build my own program. And if that's the case, you really have to admire that, right?
Right.
Like, he could have easily, the Commanders were going to give him that job. They were at the second pick in the draft, and they wanted him, and they were pissed because not only, I don't like the way he handled it. He just didn't go. It's like, I had a buddy who did that once. I had a place I was working at.
On the plane or some shit like that?
It was weird.
Yeah.
I got him an interview because he asked me to. I called in a favor to get him an interview. And the night before he called and he bailed on the interview because he didn't want it. And I was like, you just go.
I'll do you one better. I had somebody set up an interview and she showed up drunk. So
I would have rather he did that. Hell, he probably got the job. I like the cut of this guy's jib. Just walk in with a 6-pack, set it on the table, and start drinking in the interview. That would have been better than him not showing up.
No,
so I think that really, I think that really bothered me. But it's also weird, coordinators, unless like you're in the city, you don't ever like hear, like I couldn't have told you what his voice sounded like until like 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he really does seem like, I mean, the Lions talk about it and the other places he's been at. Like, he's kind of a hard ass. Like, he's very detail oriented. You have to do it. If it's going to work, we have to do it this way. And we're going to keep doing it until we do it this way. And the Bears could certainly use some of that. I think. Yeah. And then I'm as guilty as anybody else. It's like, well, of course the plays work. Look at the offensive line. They've got like Jared Goff has like 15 seconds back there.
Yeah.
And that's true, but also they really do run some pretty, like, everybody focuses on the crazy shit, right? Like they have like 8 different hook and laterals in the offense. And they just run them. My buddy Chuck Gittles, when Penei Sewell, it would look like he was going to throw the pass against the Bears, was like, oh, see, they're trying. That's they're taunting the Bears because the fridge almost threw a pass. And I was like, no, that's not why. No, I guarantee you that didn't go into anybody's mind. Well, remember that time the Bears almost had their fat guy throw? That was like it was just something they did in the offense. But they really do run some innovative stuff. And a guy was breaking down plays from the Minnesota game about how plays that looked similar to plays they ran against Minnesota the first time, where they knew the Vikings would be like, aha, we know what this is. And then they ran there was a completely different option off of it that Goff was thrown to wide open guys. He's just really good at it. And, and
I like what he's done with Goff. I mean, that regardless. I mean, Goff was fairly successful, earlier with McVay, but he tailed off a little bit. And I think that the way that Johnson has gotten the most out of him and the way that they run the ball, I appreciate that. And I just think that that's the way the NFL is going right now again, too, is, more of a balanced game. And they've figured out a little bit of the passing game and they've really come back to the run. So if you can run the ball, especially, I mean, I hate to say it, but in Chicago, until we get a dome, you have to be able to run the ball.
Yeah. Well, and I think people have talked about that's the appeal of Liam Cohen. Yeah. Baker threw 40 touchdown passes this year, but Bucky Irving got 1,000 yards, averaged 5 yards a carry.
Yeah.
Like they're doing both of the things you're supposed to do.
That's it.
Everybody talks about it, but most teams don't actually pull it off. So we'll see.
Yeah, the only thing is he does seem a little weird. He can be a little odd, but he also comes off very intense. And I think that can work. Yeah, I heard St. Brown talking about him today, and something I was reading, he was just saying that how impressed he was with the way that he detailed plays and how much, respect that he commanded it, from the offense. So I think he's the guy. I think I'll be slightly disappointed if it doesn't work out that way, but there's other guys that I could be happy with.
Somebody was talking about today, like, why would you go to the NFC North? I mean, why would you? You're going to have to get through the Lions and the Vikings and the Packers. It's like, because it's football. And in 2 years, believe it or not, it'll be different. Like, this shit changes like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah. The Vikings might be not that good next year.
Exactly.
For all we know. Yeah.
And then the Lions, that one of the reasons that they're so all in this year is that for the great job they've done of accumulating talent, they're going to start to get up against the cap, and a bunch of these guys are going to start to leave. And you're just not going to have them. And you have to be able to, that's why this whole league is designed for teams, for everybody to eventually end up 8-8. And that's why you look at the Bears this year, they played 10 games that were decided by 6 points or less. They only won 3 of them. And that's actually like that's a low number. Most teams play like 12 games that are decided by a touchdown or less, because the whole league is designed around that. And so having a head coach like the Flus, who didn't seem to know what to do at the end of games, it's crippling, because you're going to have a bunch of close games. You're going to have to be good at it, or you're just not going to win anything. You're going to be, I don't know how the fuck the Bears lost 10 in a row. Well, I mean, I watched it. But
in the beginning of the year, you and I said, like, if they're 7-10 with a bullet and Caleb's playing well, we'll be okay with that, at the end of the day. And they should have won 7 games.
Yeah, they should have been, without doing anything
pretty
extraordinary,
easily, actually.
They probably should have been 8-9.
Yeah.
You know,
and that would have.
They will swear that the Packers cheated on the blocked field goal. That they rolled the center to get to the and then Cairo would have made that, so that's a win. If Tyreek doesn't, do whatever the fuck he did, they beat the Commanders, so there's another win. So now you're already at 7, and you just need to win one of those other close games
even
that you
just
fucked
at
up,
7,
and you're 8-9. Yeah, and there's a different feeling. Maybe you'd still end up. Maybe the Flus would still be here, and then the long term, it may have been the best thing long term for the Bears that they did this, and they fired him, and now they have to really fix it. So,
yeah, I would have fired him after the Washington game, and you might, you might not have turned your season around, but that was a fireable offense that game.
Well, and there was that, then they played the Cardinals and got rolled.
Yeah, that was bad.
And the Cardinals were a much better team, but you shouldn't have lost to them by 20 points. That was bad. And then the Patriot loss was inexplicable. And that was the one that supposedly Poles went and said, okay, we need to fire him. And somebody, George or Kevin, said, no, you don't. You wanted him. You got him. And then it wasn't until the Toyota, the Thanksgiving, the whole world watching, where you're like, okay, you're right. We have to do it now. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching the end of that game and thinking, okay, that ought to do it, because that was
Caleb got
just embarrassing enough.
10 times by the Patriots. All right. What do you think of Joe Barry, the offensive coordinator for the Bills?
From what I understand, I do like him.
Joe Brady.
Yeah, and he's got some ties with Caleb.
So his claim to fame, right, was that he was the offensive coordinator at LSU with Burrow and all those, whatever, those wide receivers that year when they won the national championship, like Jamar Chase and those guys.
Yeah,
and then he got a shot immediately with the Panthers, and it didn't work. But now we know nothing works with the Panthers. So he ended up in Buffalo. He was like, when Dable left to go to coach the Giants, I think I have this right. That's when they made Ken Dorsey the offensive coordinator, and then they brought Brady in to be like the special assistant. And then they ended up canning Dorsey, and they made Brady the offensive coordinator. And then Dorsey went to Cleveland, and he's got whacked again. He's getting good at getting fired.
Brady was a hot name there for a while.
He was.
Yeah.
He was a hot name when the Bears were not interviewing him when they hired the Flus, because he wasn't on the magic Bill Polian list of duds that he assembled for the Bears. That's another underrated aspect of this, right? So, like, it's easy to think back and not remember this. So they hire Polian is interviewing coaches, and he's interviewing GMs, and they hired Poles, and they said, okay, you can hire anybody you want, but here are your 3 finalists. And it was Dan Quinn, Jim Caldwell, and the Flus. And Jim Caldwell was still standing at a bus stop, staring blankly into the sky. And Dan Quinn was like, I think I'm going back to the Cowboys. And then they hired the Flus. That is people talking about Bear dysfunction now. This is 1,000 times better than what it was then, when they couldn't even run their own search. They had to go dig Bill Polian out of mothballs to do it. And all he did was open up his old Colts Rolodex and just picking guys out of that. It's like, jeez.
Right. They could have just read an article in The Athletic. Fucking, what are you doing?
Yeah. Just Google NFL head coaching candidates and just pick a few. It'll be fine. George got asked in his little hallway press
Twitter,
conference,
for God's sake. Yeah.
Somebody said, hey, Bill Polian was involved in the search last time. Is he going to be involved in it this time? And George, the answer to that is no. George is like, well, if Ryan wants him to, I'd be fine with it. No, shut up, you idiot. No.
Yeah, I was surprised at some of the answers yesterday. I was actually surprised that Poles was candid enough to not rule out trading for a coach. That was interesting.
Yeah. Which I don't think they
like you were saying, if you're going to get a defensive guy, it's got to be somebody who's done it before. It's like, yeah, who knows? Maybe they still got thoughts of trading for Mike Tomlin, which you could probably get him pretty cheap.
Yeah, I mean, that dude hadn't won anything for a long time now.
No,
And
no.
his claim to fame is they somehow get to
But
9 wins.
in his defense, well, they haven't had a quarterback since Roethlisberger.
Yeah, since Ben, they haven't. And that's the
Yeah.
way the league works, right? I mean, that's if
Yeah.
you have a quarterback, you have a chance. And if you don't, you really don't have a chance.
And that's the
we
thing.
know
I
that.
think
We're Bear fans. They hadn't had a quarterback for 50 years. And now they finally have one.
He's a top 10 coach, if you put everything else in there. But yeah.
Yeah, like if they pulled that, if they did it, I wouldn't be sitting here going, I can't believe they did that. I mean,
No,
I would say
I'd
I
be
can't
okay
believe
with
they
it.
did that. I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be like pissed about it.
No. No, I don't think
there was
many
the
people
whole
would.
because Thomas Brown kind of looks like him. They have the beard and they have
Right, of course, yeah.
but also the way there's something about the way the two of them talk where they kind of they break their sentences into short things and then they're very emphatic. He got immediately compared to him and I laughed about it, but then they both went 1-4 in their last 5 games.
Yeah.
So who knew? They really did hire the next Mike Tomlin.
Yeah. It doesn't look
Iowa
good
State,
right now for him.
It does not. But the Steelers never fire anybody, so he gets to coach there for 20 more years. Iowa State coach Matt Campbell. What do you think of Matt Campbell? I like
don't
this.
know what this
Everybody's trying to draw these comparisons. Like, I'll bet you Poles knows Campbell because when he was a scout with the Chiefs, they drafted Kareem Hunt, and Kareem Hunt played for 3 years for Matt Campbell at Toledo. It's like, Jesus Christ, we're really grasping for straws at this point. This feels very Bulls to me. This is Tim Floyd, Fred Hoiberg. He may be a hell of a coach. I don't want him. So, no.
Yeah.
Stay in Ames. Ask Fred. Ask Fred if he wished he'd stayed in Ames. He had to go to Nebraska.
It scares me because is it, what's his name? Kyle Brandt from...
Yeah. Good Morning Football.
What am I saying? Yeah, he was saying that he's like, you watch, they're gonna pull somebody out of their ass.
Yeah,
And I
that
was
would be an
thinking,
ass
like,
pull.
oh no, here he comes today. Yep. When I heard
So
that
Brian
report.
Flores, I already poo-pooed that because I don't think George would hire anybody in active litigation with his beloved NFL.
No.
And then there's the guy I still think. Here's what I think. I think if they don't get Vrabel or Brady, this is the Cliff Kingsbury. This is the guy. Because him and Caleb hung out on campus for 3 months a year ago together. And the Bears are going to be like, this will work. This is going to be great. And then the Bears can go through the whole Cliff Kingsbury experience where they hire him. And for 9 weeks next year, Caleb is on pace to throw for 6,000 yards and 80 touchdowns. And then the Bears miss the playoffs because once the league figures out what Cliff's doing, Cliff can't adjust.
Right.
I will give him credit. The Commanders followed that same trajectory again. But this time, maybe it's because Jaden, has the added dimension of being an incredible runner. They pulled out of it. And the offense was good again at the end of the year. That's something Cliff had never done before. He's been a coach before. He didn't get fired from the Cardinals because he lost the locker room or whatever. He got fired because they didn't win enough, and the Cardinals like to fire their coach every 3 years. He's handsome. He'll look good. They could do worse. I just think they could do a lot better than Cliff with a K.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't hate it on the surface. And, he said that he's learned some things from his stop in Arizona, but I wouldn't love it.
I do think coaches tend, well, unless you're a disaster, I think coaches who have some success but don't quite pull it off in their first stop, those guys seem to do better. Like they really do figure, like if I get to do this again, I'm doing this instead of that. I do think there's some wisdom in that, which is why it's been so frustrating that the Bears in the 104-year history now have hired 2 coaches who coached an NFL team before the Bears.
Yeah.
John Fox and Patty Driscoll. Patty Driscoll, who, if he was alive today, would be 140 years old. It's like, Jesus, just try something. What about Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken?
Yeah, I don't know much about him. I don't think that there's a lot of excitement.
He's been a college head coach, I believe.
Hmm.
The Ravens run some funky stuff. He was as much as people loved. What was the guy? Because the Bears almost hired him. He's now the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. I'm blanking. Why can't I think? Guy who coached for he coaches for Harbaugh. Big fat guy's the offensive coordinator.
Yes, I know exactly who it is. I just can't think of it right now.
Their passing games is always like very like rudimentary. And there was this thought around the league, well, you have to do that with Lamar. And it's like, did you guys not watch Lamar at Louisville? Lamar threw the ball all over. There's a reason he won the Heisman. He threw the ball all over the place. And Monken comes in and it's like, no, Lamar can throw. We're going to throw. And their offense has been much better the last 2 years.
It's been really good. Yeah.
And then there's David Shaw, a guy who had success he has a lot of NFL history. He came out of the NFL to replace Harbaugh at Stanford. He worked with the Ravens for a long time. He had success at Stanford. Is a really hard place to sustain success because of the
he was a hell of a coach there,
and he did a very nice job. And then it kind of petered out at the end. He did NFL draft coverage on NFL Network for a few years. He was really good. I don't know what that counts for.
He seems like a really great football
glad
guy,
he's on the list. That's the kind of guy, when you go beyond the obvious candidates, bringing somebody like this actually gives me a little faith that they're like, who'd be good? This guy would be good. Because I do think he'd have a chance to be good. I don't know that you could convince me. And then in a year,
here's
I can be on a podcast yelling about what a moron you were for hiring him. That's
they're not in a position though to fuck this up though, because
they're not.
You've got
you can't really go.
You've got coming off this
chancy
dumpster fire and having Caleb and trying to get this new stadium built. They kind of need a slam dunk. They can't be fucking around with the David Shaw hires.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that
when he might have been a really good hire was instead of the Flus. Yeah.
But I think he was a big name back then, or at least a big name in the NFL circles.
And then that would have been, you would have basically said, okay, we're tearing this to the studs, and you're going to get to build this the way you want to. And we're going to be terrible at some point, and we're going to draft a quarterback, and you're going to be in charge of helping us pick the quarterback.
No, yeah.
So I think you're right. I think they missed the window to make this.
Yeah.
I think that 3 years ago, this was a guy that would have been a good choice. Right.
They need a Vrabel, a Johnson. They need someone that's like, everyone's going to be like, okay.
So I made a joke on Monday's column that was only for me. Or I don't think it was on that. It might have just been on Blue Sky when they announced that this was a guy they were going to bring in. And the joke was that the reason they brought Arthur Smith in is because George wanted to tell him that he found the hidden arrow in the FedEx logo. And I know there's like 4 people in the world who understood that joke. I'm wondering if you are one who understood that joke.
No, I'm sorry.
It's a thinker. Arthur Smith's dad founded Federal Express.
Oh, God. Did not know that.
Arthur is like Charlie. He's more like Charlie Weiss Jr. than Charlie Weiss. Like, he didn't play. I'm sure he played high school, but he didn't play in college, and he ended up becoming an NFL coach. And part of it was because he had a rich dad and didn't need, like the rest of us, didn't need to like get a real job coming out of college. He was able to just go work. He wanted to be a football coach. So he went to colleges and took crap jobs, and he did whatever. And he proved himself that he knew what he was doing. And he was the offensive coordinator for the Titans with Mike Vrabel when they somehow turned, God, why am I blanking on? Who was the quarterback they got from the Dolphins who ended up good for 2 years? Ryan Tannehill. And he turned Ryan Tannehill into a good player.
Yeah.
And then Ryan got hurt, and then when he came back, he wasn't any good anymore. But Arthur had left to go to the Falcons. It's funny, I was like, when they hire Vrabel, they should just hire Arthur to be the offensive coordinator. I'm like, well, no, they can't do that because he's the Steelers' offensive coordinator. You don't get to like just take the guys. We'd like your offensive coordinator now because he worked well with Mike before and he did a good job with the quarterback. So we're just going to take Arthur. It's like, no. It's funny. When Arthur was with the Falcons, he apparently was the guy in the draft room who told them not to draft Justin Fields. It's like, nope, he's not. This guy can't make the throws we need him to make. He can't make the decision, but he's a great athlete, blah, blah, blah. Goes to the Steelers. They trade for Justin Fields. And it was his quarterback for like the first 5 games. And then as soon as Russ was healthy, they're like, okay, that's enough of that. We'd actually like to throw the ball once in a while. So I don't think Arthur Smith. And then Anthony Weaver, defensive coordinator, the Dolphins. He's apparently his agent is really good at talking to sports writers because he's like the guy who's like, oh, yeah, that's the dark horse candidate. He'd be great. Oh, he's a leader of men. It's like, okay, he's like 35 years old. Let him go. Let him coach somebody else first, not my Bears.
Yeah.
Then Thomas Brown, who I think is probably going to get the job. They do this exhaustive search. Like, you know what? we're just going to keep Thomas. He's already got. Remember, when they went from Matt Nagy to Matt Eberflus, it was to save money on like changing the signage. And when they went from Ryan Pace to Ryan Poles, it was the same thing. Like Thomas already, they don't have to make new keys for a guy. He already has all the sweatshirts. It'll be fine. Okay, the last thing, and then we're going to talk quickly about the Cubs. I have a theory as to why they called the Cowboys and asked for permission to interview Mike McCarthy.
Okay.
I think they were doing a favor for Mike McCarthy's agent.
Yeah.
Because it helps with his leverage. Because Mike wants to stay with the Cowboys, and I think the Cowboys want to keep him. And Jerry's just doing the thing he always does, where he doesn't have to sign until the 14th. And he's just going to wait till like the 13th to make him a real contract offer. And I think it was one of those things. And so I was trying to figure out, and I was unsuccessful, who else on the coaching list had the same agent as Mike McCarthy? Because like maybe they're doing a favor for McCarthy to get themselves in good with one of the other candidates. I was hoping Ben Johnson and Mike McCarthy had the same. They don't. They do not have the same agent, and neither does Vrabel. So I don't know. But can you imagine?
That would have been a good theory.
What would? Yeah, it was a good theory if I could have possibly connected any dots.
Yeah.
I'm basically Charlie from All Was Sunny, standing in front of the wall with all the pins and stuff, looking for the Nightman. How pissed off would Bear fans be if they hired Mike McCarthy?
Who?
Bears fans. If that's who they decide. That was the big announcement. We're going with the big gerbil. He's gonna be your coach. It's like, oh, really? Thanks. That'd be great. Or do you think they'd actually would Bear fans talk himself into it? He won a Super Bowl with the Packers. Of course he knows what he's doing.
You know, it's one of those things where like the guy just doesn't excite you, but he does know how to get to 11, 12 wins every year. It's just, I mean, I don't know, maybe just because of Dak's, limitability, that like maybe that has held them back a little bit. But yeah, plus the other thing that really bothers me about him is that he has a lot of those Eberflus moments at the end of games too. Yeah. I mean, the Cowboys have famously fucked up the end of games.
I mean, he had Aaron Rodgers for a decade.
Yeah.
And they went to one Super Bowl. They won it. That's all they did.
That's a good point.
And they lost games in some holy shit. I can't believe they lost it that kind of way.
Yeah. I mean, getting 11, 12 wins every year is something to be said, but there was something that's kind of fucked up about that too, when you don't win big. So I mean, everybody still talks about the Lovies last year when, he was 10-6 and they fired him. Didn't he lose like 4 out of the last 6 games? Yeah. And it was just not a good year.
Was
by these standards.
Getting rid of Lovie was not a terrible decision. It was that they replaced him with Trustman.
Hired the wrong guy.
I think if they had gone to Arians, I do think
it would look good.
It would have worked. Now that part of the reason they did it was the defense. Well, Phil Emery was a moron, but the defense was aging out. And so the whole reason for Lovie and his success was starting to go away. Yeah. And it was either double down and he's got to try to rebuild this defense that now is not really being played in college and not really being played in the NFL anymore. So it's really hard to identify guys who fit in it the way you want to. And how are you ever going to replace, Brian? The reason that the Tampa 2 was so good, you had Derek Brooks basically eliminating the middle of the field, and then he comes to the Bears and he's got Urlacher who could do the exact same thing, and it makes a lot of that work.
And breaks.
You just have to find another Derek Brooks and Brian Urlacher. That's all you got to do. It's easy, no problem. 2 first ballot Hall of Famers. I'm sure you can find another one. It was the way it was replacing him with Trustman, and then it just started a cascade of crap. It wasn't moving on from Lovie was not a bad decision, but everything that happened after that was a bad decision, and that's how they got to where they are.
Yeah.
Okay, so there we go. We solved it all for the Bears. Just hire Ben Johnson, and if you can't get Ben, hire Mike Vrabel, and then we're all good.
Mm-hmm.
So last thing I want to talk to you about real quick was so the big news that'll come out in Major League Baseball in the next 8 days is Japanese fireballer Roki Sasaki is supposed to pick his team. And the Cubs apparently have made it into at least his second round, if not his final round. And it's kind of everyone assumes it's a foregone conclusion that Roki is going to go to the Dodgers because the Dodgers get whatever they want. And they've already got Shohei and they've already got Yoshinobu Yamamoto. I just love to say Yoshinobu Yamamoto. But it seems more and more like the smart money is actually on the Padres for Roki. But for a reason that I think the Cubs could maybe sneak in there for. Here's a theory that I heard and I really liked, so I'm claiming it as my own. Because Roki is going to basically sign, he can sign the same deal with everybody. He's limited because he's an international free agent. You can only pay him X amount of money. So he's got to make the other money in endorsements. And a lot of that is going to be Japanese endorsements. And it's like, so how much money is there in Japanese endorsements to be the third best Japanese Dodger? You know, Shohei's got all the big stuff. He's wearing New Balances. Why? I don't know, but he is. I don't even know what Yamamoto is endorsing, but it's got to be something. And so it makes sense then to go, like if he goes to San Diego, it's probably the best of both worlds. He's got you there who can help mentor him, and he seems to have a relationship with you, but he's going to be the best one. You know, he's going to be the Japanese face of the Padres. But if you come to the Cubs, there's two other Japanese guys there. There's Seiya and there's Shota. And they're both popular guys, and we like them. But Roki immediately is the best of the three. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if he's anywhere near as good as we think, he becomes the Japanese star on the Cubs.
Yeah.
So I think that's what Roki should do. And instead, he'll go to the Mets for the same reason. He can be the most famous. Him and Senga can be the most. He'll be more famous than Senga, and he'll get a bunch of money and endorsements. But so that's my glimmer of hope for the Cubs.
Yeah, no, there's some logic in that.
Is that I think a star Japanese. The Cubs are good. We know the Cubs are good at making Japanese players feel comfortable, which is important. You know, Shota and Seiya both really like playing for the Cubs. And it's a good market. The team, at least for a week, Jed acted like he really wanted to win. Now he's going back like, I'm as excited as everybody else that they signed Caleb Thielbar because he's 38 years old. He hit an ERA of almost 6 last year. It's great. What a move. But he could look at it like, you know, the Cubs, we could go, we're going to go to the playoffs in that division if I go there. And they would, I think. They got him. Yeah. And with the other stuff, they're easily better than the Brewers and they go to the playoffs. So what do you think of my crackpot theory?
No, it's got some legs, and I definitely think that if they did get him, they would be the favorite for the division. So, yeah, he could do a podcast anyway with Shota. That would probably be good.
Yeah. Well, and Shota can get him a Duncan. Can figure out what his American Duncan name should be. It can't be Mike because Shota has that. It could be Larry.
Yeah.
It'd be adorable.
Plus, I mean,
Larry Sasaki Jr. and Mike Imanaga Jr. going to get their coffee. Be great.
Would the Dodgers give him a whole line of obvious T-shirts like we could?
Oh, can you imagine the shirts?
Yeah.
I am low-key excited about Sasaki. Huh?
I'll have to come up with some. But yeah, there's definitely something there.
I think so. What was the first obvious shirt that you remember? Like the first one. Like,
Jake Arrieta is good at baseball.
He's good at baseball, right?
Yeah.
Do you know that like 4 years before that, some guy had a tweet that he tweeted during the playoffs over and over again? It was Chase Utley is good at baseball. And it was me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I used to say Javi was good at baseball.
I think we have a Facebook movie situation here.
We do. I am going to go in, and they're going to.
All you need is a twin.
Yeah, I got a cousin that kind of looks like me. We could be the Winklevosses and just go in and demand my cut. That's why he gave me those 120, the hat and the sweatshirt and the T-shirt. That was my payment for coming up with the is good at baseball thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have a feeling this. Well, especially if you're going to hire Ben Johnson, isn't this coaching search is going to go on for quite a while, right?
Oh,
I don't even know what the rules are. Like
supposedly they can't even have people in the building for 2 weeks. So
Yeah, the only people who could visit were people who were not on staffs anywhere. So like, Vrabel could have come in person today.
Right.
Pete Carroll could come in person. They had another Shaw could come in person because he's not, but they're not doing it. They're treating everybody the same, which is fine.
Right.
They're just going to do
fine
Zooms for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm sure Dan Weirder was going to lose his mind about that. He was already mad that the list was too long. And he asked, how come
it is too long? But
he's like, you couldn't whittle it down over the last month? It's like, well, I have a feeling that's why it got so big. It's the opposite, right? So what about this guy? Let's talk to this guy. Let's talk to this guy. But if you're not in a hurry because of the NFL timeline, you might as well talk to a bunch of guys. What's it hurt?
Yeah.
Especially when
we're
George
looking
found
at
out
probably
that they have they already paid for teams and it doesn't matter how many times they use it. And he's like, let's interview everybody. It's free. Well, it's not really free, George, but you're right. We're not paying extra to do more calls. Well, he doesn't have anything else to do. He's got junior high girls basketball games, I'm sure, to ref. But beyond that, he's got time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to probably drag out another month.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised George was looking as spry as he was. Well, I guess it was Monday. He had a day to recover. Because I would guess Vag's 102nd birthday party they had on Sunday, especially with the big win over the Packers, that had to be a rager. George, I'm sure, had several Shirley Temples, and he was on a sugar high that I'm sure he felt on Monday morning. Getting the keys in the Camry was a little shaky, but he did it. So good for him. All right. Well, we'll have, Cubs Cubs are less than 5 weeks away from the start of spring training.
Yeah.
Because they go early because they're going to Japan. Maybe somebody should tell Jed so he could actually finish out his roster. It would be nice. All right. Well, thanks, Tom.
Many of us have herpes.
No, I thought it generally sucked. I didn't think it was a specific suck. I thought it was like an all-encompassing type of suck. So, we're going to try and rectify that. But for right now, I'm going to be pretty pissed about it.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. Got to congratulate the Dolan family.
Sean, my podcast co-host Andy, you were his favorite player growing up.
Oh, thank you so much. Awesome.